Okay, so I'll talk about my current experience of practice. I feel like I'm getting a bit better at talking to the camera. Still kind of weird though. Um, so I mentioned in the previous video that the ego had a need for, or a desire for its own destruction, and it was seeking death in a way. I've come to realise that was based on the ego's false ideas of cessation and the ego's inability to understand the concept or to know the concept of no self. I've been experiencing recently very strong death anxiety, and fear, death anxiety and fear from the ego or from the self. And I feel like I'm being shown a lot of the very deeply rooted inner attachments to the body and the self, and the attachment of the self to the body and the life of the body as well. And they've been coming up, and I've been, through self-inquiry and through attention, dissolving them. And they keep coming up, and they're very, very strong. And I feel like every time they come up, these attachments, I'm deconstructing them bit by bit. But it's obviously a very deeply rooted attachment, and maybe the strongest attachment is that to the physical body, and that of the self to the physical body. And I feel like it's kind of a painful experience. I could maybe describe it like the mourning of the death of the self. And it's the mind, the mind and the ego understands these concepts of no self on an intellectual level, on a mind-based thought level. But it doesn't have the ability to see it or experience it, really. I can't understand that, and I understood a lot of these things on the intellectual level pretty well, but seeing it or experiencing it for yourself really is a completely different thing. And you can maybe get glimpses, like I had glimpses before. I had times where I did experience a state of no self briefly, but the self was so ingrained into my state of being that it came back, and it didn't panic because it knew it was coming back. When you have the insight and the shift on a profound level, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And when the ego realizes that, or when the self and realizes that, it's faced with obliteration, and it will react to it. And it's not pleasant. That those levels of dissolution are quite scary to the ego anyway. But there is a deep sense of kind of not mourning, more of like a kind of like an appreciation. I don't know how to describe it, but you see how the self is made of levels. There are lots of layers and levels to the self, now which I didn't understand before, and there are lots of different layers and levels to thought as well. So, like I was saying in the previous videos, thoughts begin to take the form of like a memory, like an idea, like the idea memory of a dream that come up, rather than an actual solid thing. But what I notice when deconstructing the self more is that these attachments are very deeply rooted into kind of visceral basic instincts and emotions that are very, very strong, and you start to kind of go through them and release them, and in doing that it can be quite like painful, I would say. The shift to no self, I'm sure there are some people, maybe I know there are some people that can just do it very quickly and that's that, and they just drop it all. But the process for me is that having that perspective shift in such a profound level is not a small thing. It's a very intense thing, like I said, but not when you just understand it intellectually, but when you see it, when you experience it. A lot of illusions become apparent, and a lot of illusions are seen through. And seeing through that, the ego loses something, and that's a painful thing. Working through that. And I'm starting to see how a lot of the things that I'm starting to get some clarity on all of the motivations in my life that were based on seeking the self and the ego, and being able to differentiate between those different things with more clarity. Which of those are dysfunction? I feel like I've lost motivation for a lot of egoic endeavours of self-seeking. The motivations kind of, for the time being at least now, has diminished quite a great deal. I'm sure that will integrate itself over time, but that I'm seeing how a lot of my motivations were good and bad, not just negative, based on highs and lows of the self. And that's somewhat, it's still there, but the motivation is diminished quite a lot. I'm seeing how the egoic patterns have their momentum, and it's a kind of subconscious momentum as well. It's not a conscious thing. Even if the framing's different, the subconscious momentum and behaviour and thoughts is still running in the background. So a strange example recently, I was, and this is something that would have triggered my ego and would have annoyed me. I was waiting at a petrol station, so you've got like a few lanes like that of pumps, and I was sitting here, and there was someone that was sitting just behind me there, and one of the pumps became free. The person drove off, and I was like, and I looked in my mirror and I saw the person gearing up to go flying and gonna go by me. So I thought, nah, I'm gonna go in there first. So I flew in there. I beat the guy in, and I kind of saw it like that would have been like a framed in a negative way before, but I kind of saw it as a kind of fun little competition. But I think that maybe came from the pattern that was there before, that competitive pattern. It was maybe an egotistical thing before, but I flew away in, and I pulled up, and like I said, I saw it as like a fun little competition, and I jumped out the car and I looked at the guy and I smiled, and he wasn't happy. He was fuming, and you could see him through the window like swearing and all that kind of stuff. And then afterwards I thought to myself, that must have been really annoying. This guy cuts you up and then jumps out and he's smiling at you all smug and whatnot. But I saw it as a bit of fun, really. But the pattern is there. That's a pattern that was created by negative ego thing. But the behavioural pattern is there subconscious, and I did it even though the framing was different. That's something that would have annoyed me maybe for the next 40 minutes, maybe for the rest of the day. So I've lost a lot of kind of social boundaries. So I'm telling myself to be careful with these things, because the social boundaries are diminishing somewhat, because I was inhibited a lot by my egoic perception of things. Now a lot of that's not there. So I can see how it maybe leads to some bizarre behaviour if I'm not trying to be consciously aware of it. Yeah, but the momentum is still there. It's running in the background as it deconstructs. The framing and things is different. I feel like I'm in the process of I think the big shift happened fairly suddenly, and then the process of integration is just happening right now. Yeah, but the deconstruction of the self. Sorry, 2 seconds. The deconstruction of the self is quite a painful one, and the true realisation of no self isn't a small thing. It's quite an intense thing, especially when it's being integrated as a long-term thing. Yeah, the ego doesn't like that, and it will find ways to fight you on it, or to kind of cling on. I keep saying this a lot, it's the awakening and the enlightenment isn't what you think it is. It's not what the mental concepts of it are. It's different. It's impossible to understand what that means unless you've seen it for yourself, unless you have had the insight and the realisation. From a mind level, it's not going to touch it. Nothing close. It has to be observed for yourself. And then when you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you've seen through things, they don't have their solidity anymore. They don't have their... they're not as real. It doesn't mean they're not as real as in you detach from reality, and reality is just a dream, and everything's fake, and this is virtual reality. You can't explain it with these concepts. There's no point in really trying. I'm maybe not as good at explaining these things as some of the spiritual teachers and spiritual seekers or whatever you'll find online, like the famous ones and whatnot. Each of them do a good job at explaining these things with words in their own way and different flavours and whatnot, but it's a process. And it's not like your ego is gone and you become this kind of shining beacon of awareness. The ego's still there. At least for me, it's in the process of being deconstructed, but it functions the same. The same patterns are there. It's not like I've just dropped it. There's a space. There's a space there, and the seeing is more lucid. You see through it, and when you can do that, you can then work on deconstructing it. But I have to say, the stronger, baser attachments are very deep, and they're very connected to the body, and they are very painful to break down. For me, I can't just drop them. There's too much practice has went into constructing them over a lifetime, and you see that all the small things that trigger your ego are really connected to some of those baser levels of attachment. They're all connected, and you can see why you react in a certain way, or why the ego or the self reacts in a certain way to seemingly trivial things. Yeah, that's 15 minutes now, so that's all for now.